Hi, my name is Imre. It's a weird name, but there you go. And I've been making games all my life. In fact, some of my friends are saying that I insisted in kindergarten to invent new rules for tag, because clearly that's a game which is in deep need of innovation, and hide and seek apparently as well. So I cannot quite tell from their tone how much they hated me for that, but there you go. I did do that. I started in board games and tabletop role-playing games and collectible card games, like physical stuff. So I'm that old that we still did physical things. Then I worked at various games companies doing strategy games and action games. I was the head of a game called RuneScape. If you might be familiar, it was and still quite big. It's an online MMO. And after a while, I started my own company called Bossa Studios with a couple of friends, where we were mostly known for making comedy games. And a few years ago, I decided to step back from my role at Bossa. I'm still there as a creative advisor, and I'm still on the board, but otherwise I started some new things. I am working on immersive theater and video game adaptations of books. I've worked with a fantastic team to create a video game adaptation of George Orwell's Animal Farm, and right now we are working on another classic book adaptation. And I help companies who do games with a purpose. If you're not familiar with that, these are games which try to do more than just entertain. So these are lifestyle and educational and cultural awareness and various topics using video game methodologies. Often people use the term gamification, which I hate with a burning passion, but that is how can we use games for something more than just entertainment. And I was asked to talk about how games are made, and there are at least one game developer here. I don't know, is there someone who is actively a developer? It's just, there's, okay. Brilliant. So we can turn it into a panel about how games are made. So whoever didn't raise your hand, are you planning on working in games or some related fields? And then everyone else, I guess they just got lost. And yeah, okay. So, and because I did not know quite who the audience is going to be, I did not arrive with a big set of slides. But what I'd like to do is to work around your questions and talk about the things that you find interesting. Obviously, my knowledge is going to be, there's always the idea of observational bias, right? That your truth is what you lived through. So my perspective is mostly creative and also from the perspective of that we got lucky with Bossa Studios. And I guess I should start there of getting lucky. So people ask me of how to make it in the games industry, and I've heard it from someone else, and I really like this line, is that, well, be lucky. And Rami, if you're not familiar, is a very famous developer. He had a big talk, which he did a few times, which was basically, here is 10 things you need to make it in the games industry, and every second point was be lucky. And then afterwards was everything else of the hard work and know what you're doing and learn and all that. And then again, be lucky, be lucky, be lucky. And hello. And we've certainly been lucky with Bossa Studios in particular. I can tell you that we made a game which was a surprise hit called Surgeon Simulator. If you're not familiar, it's a physical slapstick comedy game where you're controlling one hand and you have to do a heart transplant. And of course, it's really funny. I thought it was funny, the idea that the surgeon asks for the transplant heart and the nurse is handing over, they're going to drop it. And I thought that was really funny. And my uncle, bless him, was about to go into heart surgery, and I asked him, do you think it's funny? And he said, yes, it's funny. So I was like, I'm good. I'm morally all right now to do a game about heart transplants. And I think our forecast officially was like the high, crazy, never achievable, breakout, huge success was 50,000 copies, I think. And the last time I checked, I think it was 5.5 million copies. And it's like, to this day, I have no idea why that happened, right? It was weird. It's very easy in retrospect, I can make some explanations, but I guess the reason the role of luck is important, because we didn't know, we just thought it was funny. In fact, I remember that we were sitting in a meeting and looking at the prototype, and I'm like, this is really, really stupid. And I remember telling the others that no one in their right mind would ever put money behind this and publish this game, because this is so stupid. So we must, because no one else is going to do it. And again, we put it out there mostly as a joke, and then things just blew up. And that story is, of course, can very easily call that oh, we were so talented. Or we can say, oh, we were brave to make decisions, we believed in our, and in retrospect, you hear like successful entrepreneurs like coming in retrofit a narrative of how they became a billionaire, and they forgot to mention that, before they bought a space company, Daddy gave them a pile of money from exploiting, diamond miners in South Africa, right? So it's very easy to come up with this narrative to your success, because no one wants to say, I got lucky. But when you dig a little bit deeper in luck, you start kind of picking up of what exactly happened. And that creative conviction mattered, because we thought it was funny, and because we thought, well, we build it and they will come, and because we did not try to make it a game which is going to be sold for 1 billion people, we did not have to kind of sacrifice the creative vision. We can just say, like, there was never a voice to say, oh, I can't possibly do that because it's going to exclude audiences, because no one cared, because we never assumed it's going to sell that much. And because of that, there was a strong creative conviction behind that product, which then ended up making it even funnier, because there was no apologies made. And that made it appeal to a bigger audience, because it has that authenticity. So, yes, sure, we got lucky, but it made sense at the time. We also got lucky at the time, because that was the point when on YouTube, video game coverage suddenly changed, and that was literally the hockey stick. So I knew Felix PewDiePie before he became big, and it was weird, and he literally hit the hockey stick, and there were a few other Markipliers and like a bunch of other people who, that's when they hit. That's when they went from tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands subscribers to millions. And obviously I claimed that it was because of our game, obviously. But we were at the right place at the right time, but also that was lucky, but that also that we had a team who had their finger on the pulse of the cultural zeitgeist, right? That this idea came from the fact that kind of absurd comedy at that time, and again, that was back in 2013, right? It just made sense. And I say I got lucky. And yeah, we got lucky, but it was also, there is a certain perseverance. And around that time, we almost went bankrupt as a company. And we're joking about this now, but it was real, that we were flying out to New York to sign a deal with someone. And I remember with my founding partner, we were like, I am not sure that we have money for buy a return ticket. Like, we are gonna buy one way, and then we just have to sign it, because otherwise we can't come home. So we went to this American company in New York, and that was the funniest shit, because we went there and we said, yeah, okay, so here is the pitch. And I'm like, oh, really good pitch, thanks for coming. So yeah, we're gonna let you know. I said, cool, we're gonna be back tomorrow. I said, no, we're gonna email you. No, don't worry, we're gonna be back tomorrow. And they were like, okay. I said, maybe it's a language barrier thing. And no, we were back the next day. And they were like, oh, you're back. I was like, yeah. Any questions? No, not really. So I said, don't worry, we just sit down in the kitchen. So we literally put our laptops down in their kitchen, because we're like, sooner or later, you will come here, and I'm going to be here. And then we just sat there for like a week. And then after a few days, they realized that we mean it. Like, we are going to come back every single day. And then they signed us because, So, and again, we got lucky, right? It very easily could have been that we got escorted out of the building, right? But at that time it was that, and also because I have no shame, so that helps. But the fact that we just kind of pushed through it. So what I'm trying to say with this whole kind of pointless rambling is that don't listen to me, because everyone has their biases, and everyone has their own story, and everyone is the hero of their own story. And it's very hard to, again, that observational bias, that survivorship bias, very hard to get over that. You know, it could be that, oh, I happen to wake up early every day and I'm going to say I am successful because I woke up early every day. And I was like, well, maybe, or maybe I just happen to be, and that has nothing to do with the success. I once I saw a GDC talk about a very successful game I cannot name. You'll understand why. And the person who was talking about it, I know for a fact, because I know the team, I know for a fact that that game succeeded despite of that person, not because of that person. And everyone in the room was like making notes of, oh my God, that person worked on this extremely successful and much beloved game, and they're making notes. And I was like, oh my God, this is bad, right? So I guess what you should be doing is not to take my answers, but try to think about the questions I'm answering and then come up with your own answers to those things, because again, your life experience is going to be very different. Like someone experienced in their career and someone who is, you know, just trying to get into, you live through very different things, right? I am obsessed with classical design and classical art skills and whatever, because I grew up in that era where we didn't have AI creation, we didn't even barely had digital tools, right? But that's not the same now in a new age. You don't have to do that, right? You have to find your own ways of defining yourself and your creativity. So what I'd like to do is that I want to have a few thoughts I want to share, and then afterwards, again, the dreaded audience participation. So I want to make sure that I talk about the things that are interesting to you rather than what's interesting to me. And something that, and I talked about this in the past, is that I don't know what I'm doing, right? And you don't know what you're doing either. And it's, I think it's a very scary concept for people in creative fields. But by definition, creative means that you create something new. You don't know it's new. So by definition, you don't know what you're doing, and I think it's awesome. If we knew exactly what we're doing, there is some great industries, and even in the games industry, there are people who do exactly that, and it's great. You can be successful, but I think that the vast majority of creativity comes from doing something that no one done, or at least a combination of things that no one ever combined that way, and therefore, we don't know what we're doing. But I think there's a couple of elements of that. One is that in game design, that games are so utterly complicated nowadays, right? That no one knows how they work. There is this idea that no one knows how to build a phone, like an iPhone. And if you think, oh, it was clearly something, no one does. Like, tell me, who is the one person who knows how to mine the nickel out of the ground and turn it into a chipset? And the same person knows how to program the applications, and the same person who knows how to make a lens for the camera and knows how to the web service. No one knows how to build an iPhone. And I think the same is true for games. They're so extremely complicated that we just don't know what we're doing. And I find that very encouraging, because it means that it's okay for us to say, here is a bunch of things I know, but also here's a bunch of things that I kind of feel like it's true and I'm not sure, but let's just try, and that's okay, right? And if you're clever, you're going to have a healthy mix. So you're going to have a lot of things that you know because someone else already did that, and you're just going to copy paste it. Sorry, you'll be inspired by someone else, and that's okay. And then you have a smaller segment of what you do, which is going to be brand new ideas, and it's okay to allow yourself to do that. And the same thing for business stuff. There are a bunch of people whose job it is to forecast, right? And some people are actually pretty good at it. But unless you worked on Murder Simulator 10 to 13 and you're forecasting Murder Simulator 14, and every single episode of the Murder Simulator franchise was 5% selling more than the last one, it's fairly safe to say the next one is going to be 5% more. Like, unless you do that, you are not going to know. You just don't know. Again, we don't know what we're doing. And that's scary because you know, especially if it's your own time and money, and don't misunderstand, your time is money, right? So, but especially when you contract with someone who actually gives you money, it's great, but it's also terrifying. Well, if you have conscience. If you don't, then it's awesome, right? But if you have conscience, it's really bad. Like, it keeps me up at night when I'm looking after someone else's money. So, but we don't know. We just don't know, and it's really scary. Like, again, people spend a lot of time with this, and I usually, when someone gets a bit cocky about that, I just say, okay, here's a bit of homework. Go home, look back in past, something which has historically been proven to be a breakout success, Minecraft or Among Us or Dave the Diver or Surgeon Simulator for that matter. Go back a year before that game's launched. Now, again, you know it's a success, or you already been. Go back a year before and find me evidence that you think would have stood the scrutiny of a board meeting. And you could have friends like, I guarantee you this game to be a success. You can't. You just can't. And these are things that already happened in the past. Imagine that's things about the future. You just can't. And I also think that's great. And it's not great when I have to, like, this is not how I pitch to an investor, obviously. But I think it's great because what happens that it's a proof that we are still pushing into the unknown. There is still this new territory. And I know that especially for people who lifted your hand that you're just about getting into the industry, it's really scary because you think, well, every game has been made already. Like, well, what else I'm going to come up with? No, there are still, every year, if you look at the market, some awesome stuff comes out. Who saw Dave the Diver coming? Who saw Balatro coming, for that matter? And every year you have this breakout stuff and you think, no one saw this coming, and how brilliant that is. And I find that inspiring. So there are many fields that, again, as I said, we don't know what we're doing, and we just have to kind of accept those facts. Audiences, yes, I checked my notes. Audiences, we don't know what we're doing. But the good news is that the audiences don't know what they're doing either. Players don't know what they want, right? And again, there is this famed quote by Henry Ford that I think he said that if he asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses, not for a car. And that's true for the games as well. So often I can see forums and people say, oh, I really want that. I was like, no, you don't. Like, just, and then when that thing happens, they say, oh, it's just like the last one. Like, yeah, exactly. Like, I see your Reddit post history. I know exactly that's what you asked for a year ago, right? People don't know what they want. Players don't know what they want. And a great example of this is the focus test. There was a game where I know this happened that players complained about a weapon being too weak. And the only change that happened in that game was that the sound effect of that weapon was changed to something louder. And immediately the audience feedback in the next focus round came back. I said, oh my God, this new version of weapon is so powerful and so cool. I know this happened because I was the designer who made that change and didn't tell my boss. And I told them, well, I'm not going to say I lied, but I just not quite was forthcoming with the change. They thought I changed the numbers on the damage. I didn't. I just changed this level of the sound effect. Players don't know what they're doing. And that's scary as well. But I think that, to me, that's also, again, inspiring because it makes game creation an ongoing conversation. It's not a done deal. It's not like, oh, that's it. Like, we have every audience feedback now. Yeah, we don't have to talk to them anymore. It's an ongoing back and forth. And don't get me wrong, it can be tedious and it can be difficult. And some gaming communities are less pleasant than some others, right? But I do find it quite rewarding that all of the prototypes, and again with this new book adaptation, when we put it in front of people, the reactions were really rewarding and brutal, right? And then I remember one game where the players have to press A to do something, and there was an icon on the screen, and they didn't, people just didn't know. And the first person comes in to a focus test, and you think, well, that person is an idiot, because they couldn't see it. And then the next person comes in and they also can't find, they also don't know what button to press. And then you think, okay, that person is also an idiot. And then the third person comes in and doesn't know that they have to press the button. That's the point when you start thinking, okay, maybe I'm the idiot. And then after 10, you're like, okay, you made your point. I'm gonna put in the button. On a side note, by the way, in that game, I've done a change where every 5 seconds, was it 2 seconds? I think it was 2 seconds. If you didn't press the button, the icons got bigger and bigger and bigger until it covered the screen. My boss said that I'm being passive aggressive, but whatever, right? They just don't get my art. So so we don't know what we're doing, right? And some of it, I think we solve it by just not caring, right? Like we just put our fingers in our ears and go la 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 la, and I'm just gonna do what I want to do because I believe in it. Now don't get me wrong, again, there is a survivorship bias. For every Balatro and every Dave the Diver, every Surgeon Simulator, every of these breakout successes, I'm telling you, there's a lot of games which go out and people, players hate it. Or even worse, people nothing it. Let me tell you, you're going to be asking for people hating your game because that's better than when no one gives a shit. And so it's tough, right? But again, what I mentioned about Surgeon Simulator, because all bets were off, because it didn't matter, we could just believe to our conviction that we're going to make this slapstick comedy game because we think that's funny. And having grown up watching, Monty Python and stuff, like, to me, that was, that was the source of that, and I thought that's going to be funny, and we can have that blind conviction and get on with it anyway, even when we did not have any facts to back that up. And then also what you can do is that obviously you can try to learn from your, from mistakes and learn what happens, but it's worth noting that that's a very expensive process, right? Because every time you do something, you learn and you do it better, and that's great, but it's really expensive. But I can tell you that's something which is more expensive, not learning from it and then making bad games after, one after the other. And I've been extremely blessed to be involved with some hugely successful games, and also in some games that was not, successful at all. And what's weird is that I've been involved with games which I consider to be a mediocre game, which then became a great success. And I've been games which I really loved, and I think we sold like 10 copies, right? And that was mostly my family. So it's hard to tell. Like, there's not necessarily a direct relationship between the quality of the game, however you measure it, and the success. But like, you just have to get on with it. And as I said, between blind conviction and this idea that you are going to learn from other people, that's brilliant. In fact, this is something that, because I work with TV and film and theater people, I can tell you that's something that they just don't get, especially theater. Because a play comes out, has a limited run for, let's say, 2 months, and they go through, even if they do matinee performances, they're not going to do that many, right, shows. They do that, and they learn from it, and then it kind of disappears, because there's no sharing. Like, you can't see every single play. As a video gamer, as a video game developer, you can say, oh, I'm going to make a horror game set in Seattle in 1920s. You are going to find something relevant, and then you can look at them and you can look at the video, and then if you feel it's relevant, you can buy and play that game, and you can learn from that. Like, you don't underestimate the luxury of that. And so your creative conviction is important, but just remember that it shouldn't be what I mentioned earlier. It shouldn't be all new ideas. You should be inspired by other things. And I know it's a lot of jokes about stealing, but yes, some of them is one-to-one you want to copy. Some of them you want to take what others did and do it better. Some you want to take what some other people did and then just iterate it and mix it up in a new way. And then there's like a small margin of brand new stuff. That's also, by the way, because players learn from every single game they play, and if everything is novelty in the game, they're not going to know what to do in the game, right? So again, blind conviction is part of it, and also the idea that you learn and iterate. And then the other one is that you just have to be ready to innovate. That small segment what I mentioned, you have to be willing to do that. The likelihood that you are going to beat a game which is already successful by being better at what they are already successful is slim. Not impossible, but slim. Like, they already are ahead of you, years ahead of you. So I don't think you're gonna go in and make a better game of what they are doing, especially if they keep iterating and do a new episode. You can't beat them at their game. The more likelihood is that you're gonna beat something where you introduce something crazy and new and it's yours. That's when you have a chance to really succeed. And so that innovation is really scary, because that's when, again, you get into the brand new territory. But I also think that is also the most inspiring part of the job. And one of my favorite books is Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I don't know if I think some of you might be familiar with it. It's a great book. And my definition of what innovation is comes from that. And in that, there is a line which says that how to learn to fly, and basically it says that the knack of flying is that you throw yourself on the ground and then miss. And obviously it's the part where you miss is the hard part. And it's the same thing with innovation, is that the knack for innovation is that you throw yourself into an unknown crazy idea and you just miss failure by accident, right? And so that's the part of that. Now there are practical things that you can do, from game jamming to coming up with ideas to early focus. There's a bunch of like methodologies, and I can talk about that if it's practically interesting to you. But the fundamental idea is that what I mentioned at the very beginning, that to do new things, you have to go into territories where no one else had gone before, right? And all of this is very scary. And again, I often talk to people who are, indie creators or work for big companies or work in various fields in the games industry, from various forms from programming to art, to marketing, to production, to investment, to whatever, and why people are doing it. And there's a healthy mixture, I would say, strategically, of fame and fortune. And that's okay to find your own fame and fortune, right? Who doesn't want to be, own a yacht or whatever, right? That's money is cool, right? I can buy shit. But also your definition of fame. I promise you that the person who is working on like Coffee Talk, their version of fame is very different from someone who is working on Call of Duty. And it's okay. It's okay to have your own version of fame and fortune. And it's okay to admit that. I sometimes meet people who are in this weird kind of magical land where they kind of don't admit to it. And they I'm only doing it for the art. And I was like, that's cool. And what's going to be your job? It's games. Like, no. Like, you have to do something commercial. Otherwise, you're not going to make money. And it's okay to do it just for the art, but then your chances of being able to do that as a full-time job are slim, right? And we can argue that we should have a society where everyone has a basic universal income and then everyone can do whatever. And by the way, I'm backing that movement, and you should too. But until we get there, you have to pay your bills, right? And so with my new studio as well, like I'm fortunate enough that I'm in a position that to be able to say no to things, but still, that's how I fund my crazy ideas. That's how I fund all my prototypes I'm doing. I fund it by doing work which I know that is going to generate money. And when I work on my new game ideas, I know that there are some crazy ideas out there which are risky, but there are also things which I know are kind of known and tested and sellable. I'm going to stop my monologue here. So I guess what I want to do next, because we still have some time, is that what are the fields that you find interesting, or you are unsure, or you would like to learn about how games are made, and I would be very happy to try to talk about those things. So anyone who is going to be brave enough to ask the first. Please go ahead.
You talked about how a lot of it is just getting lucky.
Right.
Do you have any kind of advice or top tips on getting in positions where you can be lucky?
Right.
Or where your luck almost does something for you? Because you can put yourself in a position where being lucky is better. Does that make sense?
This is a super deep question. Like, I could spend the remaining time just talking about that. I don't know if you realize how wise that question is. Like, it's really there. Now, there is a very simple answer, right? That what are your chances of rolling a 6 with a die? I was like, 1 in 6. I was like, okay, how can you maximize your chances of getting 6? Well, one is that you buy a trick dice, right? But the other one is that you just keep rolling the dice, and at some point you're going to have a 6. And I know that's not a sexy answer. I know that, but I know like some people will like tell that you just have to put in the work, and it's really, and people don't want to hear that. I know that people want to see this kind of get rich quick scheme of how to do that. Oh, here's a little shortcut you type in this cheat code and then suddenly it's going to work. No, I'm afraid there isn't one. At least I did not discover or haven't observed anyone else doing that. There are people who just roll sixes because that's what happens, you know. There are projects who are frustratingly successful, like out of the gate. And you just think this is really frustrating. Like, this person outsold me in the first year of their career to what I've done over decades. And yeah, that happens. And it also happens that there's a bunch of people who are talented and whatever, and it just never happens to them. So there's always a chance of luck, but what I found is that you can kind of stack the odds in your favor by putting in more work and surround yourself with the right people to work with, who are going to inspire you and who are going to kind of bring in their luck. Because then suddenly, to continue this forced kind of image of the die, now two of you are throwing a die, right? And if you're willing to listen to each other, one of you is more likely to roll a 6, and now suddenly that carries you on. I know that my business founders, Enrique and Roberta, Roberta mostly she's like marketing and audiences, and Enrique is like the cool business guy. Like, to put it into perspective, I was like a really bad nerd in Eastern Europe. He used to be cool in Rio. Like, how we are friends, I don't quite understand, but it somehow works. You know, we are different types of nerds, but we are very different, and we bring in very different things. And we had fierce arguments. And my advice is to surround yourself with people who want to have those fierce arguments with you, but fundamentally coming from the place of wanting to come to a solution. It's not about winning, but finding something which is awesome, right? To me, that's how innovation happens. It's often I say that teams who are culturally homogeneous, and I don't just mean about, you know, nationality or cultural heritage or sexual orientation or whatever identifier you have. If it's a very homogeneous group, they are usually really good at iterating things and making marginal improvements, which, by the way, is necessary. That happens. There is a job for that. But then there is also when you have a culturally mixed group and then weird questions come up. This is a literal conversation we had where someone said, oh, the good guy is going to wear a white hat. And someone's like, no, good guys wear a black hat. Like, what? No, what? And then suddenly you question the whole idea of what is white and black means, because you just grew up watching different Saturday morning cartoons. And I think that's great for creativity. But as far as the putting in the effort and how to kind of, again, increase your chance, again, just keep rolling the die. I had one of the favorite job interview when I was interviewing someone for a job was this person comes in super nervous and literally shaking. And he was like, oh, okay. So, and I said, okay, what do you want to talk about? I said, oh, I have something I prepared. Is it okay if I show it? I said, yeah, show it. Open, and it was a spreadsheet. I thought it was going to be like a slideshow or something. It was a spreadsheet, and I was like, okay, this is new. I never had someone show me a spreadsheet in a job interview, but it's like, yeah, let's see what happens. And then we're like, okay, so I made my first game when I was 14, I don't remember, and I was something like that. And then I did, and it was really shit, right? And I didn't know what I'm doing, it didn't work. And then I did this one, and I finished it, but actually, no, that was bad because of this. And then, so that's when I went to uni, and at uni we had this group project, and that failed because of this. And I was like, yeah, you are hired. And then I remember thinking how long I have to sit here to go through, but I was like, hey, he's on a roll, let's just let it happen. And the vast majority of the project in his silly little spreadsheet were basically just reasons why things failed. But I was like, someone who has that resilience, that after every single failure, they come back and they try again. And then at some point, they develop the perspective of being able to look back at their body of work and say, this is why that didn't work. Rather than, the audiences don't get my art. Right? Which, by the way, will happen. Again, the game I love the most I ever worked on, we sell nothing, right? And so that's gonna happen, right? But that conviction and that willingness to go in and learn and iterate, and that, I knew immediately that we are we're looking at someone who is going to be a great fit for our team. I talked about observational bias and survivorship bias and all of these kind of opinion things. Something which is worth saying is that don't allow yourself to be defined by other people's successes, because you don't know the full story. And I have a friend of mine, she started working on the tail end of Grand Theft Auto 3 in that. She is working now on Grand Theft Auto 6. Every year her role got more and more specialized and more senior. She's a programmer, like she's working on a project, and she told me a while back that if I do nothing else but work on Grand Theft Autos for the rest of my life, I'm gonna be so happy. And I said, that's literal hell. Like if someone told me that, that's like, if there is a hell, my personal hell, that's exactly what it looks like. They're gonna be like, you're gonna be working on Murder Simulator every single for eternity. That's horrible. Like, so it's okay for other people to have different opinions. And I know, and please don't take it, anyone who's like younger in the audience, like don't take it as a sign of like I'm patronizing you. Is it patronizing or patronizing? I never know which one is the UK English version. Is it patronize? Patronize, yeah. So I don't want to do that, right? But it's easier to have that perspective on yourself when you're older. It takes more effort when you're younger, because you're still growing up, right? And you have less data, right, about yourself, right? I am old enough now that I have enough data about myself to be cleverer, right? But just that's if you remember that it's okay to understand trends and follow inspiring things and all that, but just ultimately don't let other people define you, because they don't know you, and they don't know your future, they don't know the future. And so in this case, there are certain things, however, which are true, is that I found that there is a very heavy kind of correlation between people who work hard, people who are successful. I'm not saying it's one-to-one. I've seen a lot of people who work hard and did not achieve success, of course, and vice versa. But statistically speaking, one way to increase your chance of your luck, coming in, is by keep doing games. To put it into perspective, at Bossa Studios, I was chief creative officer there. And one of my motto was that my job is not to be creative, my job is to create an environment where everyone else can be creative. And so we've done game jams. Pretty much every single game you've ever seen coming from Bossa Studio was game jams. Now, admittedly, I was involved in those game jams, and often I myself joined the team and did something which was anyway, that's a whole different conversation why that was dangerous, but and so a lot of that creativity come from that. So when you look at it across a year, we did a game jam every single month. We shut down the studio for 2 days, sometimes for a whole week. And when we grow to the size of like 100 people, teams of ranging from 2 to 6 people, we were generating dozens of ideas and playable prototypes every single month. And so by the end of the year, we're looking at 100 plus games. So when people looked at our games and they said, well, how did you follow up this one-of-a-kind surgeon success with the next game, I Am Bread? If you're not familiar, you're playing the role of a sentient slice of bread, which is as stupid as it sounds. And how did it happen? And we can just say, oh, we're such a creative studio. It's like, no, we just made 100 prototypes, and like one of them was good enough to admit to the public, right? So more effort. And again, I know it's not the sexy answer, but I am afraid that's what I found to be the most reliable answer. Is to do a lot and iterate. Oh, speaking of which, don't start developing your massively multiplayer open world shooter at university. No, recreate Minesweeper as your first project and work from there, right? And especially if you look at a game market where Balatro is a great inspiration. Are you familiar with Balatro? Who is anyone who doesn't know? Okay, anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a card game, and it's so annoying because it's one of those games when you play it is that I could have come up with this. That is a game that literally, if you don't know how to make games, you don't know how to program, you could make a first version of that within a few months. Of like, you don't know how to code, and you get to the point that you can code. That's so annoying. that game sold like 1 million copies in like a week or two. And so there are this kind of surprise stuff out there, right? And those things happen because people keep doing cool shit. Right. Sorry, it was a really long-winded answer. Yes, sir.
Just sort of follows on from that. When you are looking down the barrel of your next project,
right?
What's your approach to determining the scale that you want that to be? So whether you're self-funding or you're going to go and pitch in, how do you constrain the size?
So it's really it's a very tricky answer to the question, a very tricky question to answer. Sorry, because it really depends. There have been times when I was pitching an idea to someone for funding or whatever, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we don't." I think it was like a $1.5 million project, and they said, "Oh, we don't look anything up to 5." And I was like, and literally, I was like, 1 minute. And I went into the presentation, deleted 1.5, put in 5, and I was like, cool. So let's continue the conversation beside how long is a piece of string. But what I find is that both from a creative point of view and from a business point of view, cash flow and all that, like focus on doing smaller things which are targeting a smaller audience reliably rather than trying to do something bigger. Because simply, but that was my business philosophy at Bossa as well, and with my new studio as well, and because I feel like getting into the big game territory is so hard. It takes so much money that your chances are probably better if you do more smaller things and more niche weird things and find a small audience you really understand and serve that audience. You don't have to make a game which is for 1 billion people. You need to make a game which is for 50,000 people. Just make sure that those 50,000, every single one of them buys it. You don't want, X% of 1 billion. You want 100% of that niche, because guess what? When that happens, that niche is going to be so pumped about it that they're going to tell other people. Again, Bellatro is the perfect example. I'm going to be honest with you. If they came to me for advice, I would have said, "Oh, this is an awesome game. It's the perfect mobile game." Yeah, but mobile is really tough. Yeah, you probably have to go Apple Arcade. Apple Arcade, you maybe get a few 100,000 contract, and then you probably not get any money after that. And that's the advice I would have given, and I would have been 100% wrong. Right? They did the right thing. They went on Steam, put up a high price point, and again, 1 million copies sold. So with the scaling, for me, it was always that there is also a psychological part of it, is that I find that any game, like you have to justify every day after a year. 1 year, it's fine. Like a 1 year development is fine. Anything beyond that, you have to have a strong reason for every single one of them. Now, and I say that I work on games which take 2-3 years, right? And the same thing with the team size. I personally think that when you get 8 to 12 people, suddenly you will need people whose job it is to help communication between the group, and it's a very different structure. You're not like a small cohesive team anymore. Now you have a structure. So these are my personal kind of back of a napkin, right? I did 6 to 12 people, 1 to 2 years tops. Keep the creative momentum. Make sure that you make a version which you can put in players' hands really early, so there is iteration. But obviously, you're not gonna make Call of Duty like that, right? You can make a weird indie game like that, but not those big ones. And if someone starts their career, and again, scope is really helpful. I am friends with Mike Bithell. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He made a game called Thomas Was Alone, which if you haven't played, you absolutely must. It's an absolute masterpiece of art. And he actually worked in my team, and I hired him specifically with the caveat that he continues working on it because I played the original prototype. And I thought it was going to be successful. I did not know how successful it's going to be. And so it was a funny moment when Mike came in very sheepishly saying is that, well, he'd like to resign because he wants to make their own company. And I was like, dude, we were taking bets of how long it's going to be before you say this, because it was so obvious from like the first week of sales that, yeah, you're fine now. But what was interesting in his creative process is that he was doing it whilst doing a full-time job at somewhere else. And it's tough, let me tell you. Like when people are, oh yeah, I'm working 80 hours of work. Nah, it's just not scalable. I'm tell you, because I've done that and I only have regrets. Like the damage it done to my mental health, to my relationships, to my whatever, it's just not worth it, right? And I care about this as an art as much as it is a business, and I can tell you that it was not worth it. So especially when you do something besides something else, so you have a job somewhere or you're in school or whatever, and then on top of that, you want to be sure that you have something early on you can tell it is worth your time, and then you can iterate quickly and release it within reasonable time, because there will be a creative fatigue coming in. But again, from a business perspective, just cash flow, right? Just make sure that you have enough cash to actually do it. This was not a question, but I'm going to cover this here because it's somewhat relevant about publishing. We all hear about it. I think that the latest number is now, I don't know, you might know, or someone might know that. How many people were lost in the last year? It's like 20,000. Yeah, it's horrifying, right? And it is, and especially like it's even for me. Like I can tell you, like I had a project canceled on me just literally a couple of weeks ago, and pitching for funding is so much harder, and it's harder because fewer people spending less money, and there's not just that there's bigger competition for that, but also there's a bunch of games which get cancelled. So you're pitching with your idea or a small prototype against someone who's a team who's been working on that game for a year and are fully funded. And they're the two prototypes next to each other. It's rough. And people are goes, oh, it's going to be horrible. Right. Just something to remember, that this is a readjustment of the market. It's the same way that a 2% mortgage didn't make any sense. The same way what we had, the income which built up during the pandemic, didn't make any sense. This is a readjustment. Just try to look at meta figures. If you look at Steam, year on year, it's growth. Every single year there is growth. Every single year there are breakout indie hits. Every single year, this is happening. This is a creative industry. It's always going to be hit driven. It's always tough. Just 1 second. It's always going to be there, right? This is not an industry where you dig a hole and you get paid for digging a hole, right? It's always going to be a high risk venture. But the reality is that the market is growing year on year, and a lot of it was just readjustment and late stage capitalism, which again, universal basic income, but that's a different discussion. So just don't be scared what you hear on the market. It is tough. The motto for a lot of companies is just to survive 24. But long term, I have no doubt that this industry is just going to continue growing.
On the topic of publishing, for people who are just getting into the industry, if you're making your own games, you're making prototypes, what's your advice for putting them out there? You know, is it just make them put one edge, get out? Is it make sure they're polished, get them out? Is it make 100 games rather than one polished one?
It depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to go to a publisher, they will want to see a well-developed prototype, right? Now, how you get there, some publishers are itchy about, that was no pun intended, being on itch, but like there's a bit because they don't want the game to be out in the public. But I can tell you that there are countless successes, from Thomas Was Alone to Minecraft to whatever, which been out in the wild for ages before they became big. So I would rephrase this slightly, that if you're looking for a job, I think you want to prove your expertise and learning, and I find that doing a lot of small games and a lot of different stuff is usually a better proof of your skill set if you're looking for a job somewhere. And by the way, for most people who want to become an indie developer, just know that the vast majority of indies you admire were employed and learned their trade being paid by someone else. So just don't underestimate that path of journey. So that's that. If you are trying to raise funds, most likely you are going to fail production due diligence, not creative due diligence. So they're going to say, this is a great idea, I don't believe you can make it. So for that one, again, the more experience you have, and you can say, I've done all of these games and I have this great team I'm working with, that's a great way to increase your chances of getting funding. And then otherwise, the example is to just know your niche. There are many games which are out there which done that. My good friend and business partner Enrique, he started a project called ZX Spectrum Next. If you're not familiar, ZX Spectrum was an early personal computer. It was an awesome device back in the olden age. And he made a version of that, which was building a new version of that, and it's hardware emulated the old device, so you can play all the old games, but it has HDMI output and all that. He worked with the original industrial designer to make the keyboard feel the click just exactly how that kind of buttery, rubbery weirdness of the original one. It was awesome. And it doesn't make any sense. You think, well, who? Like, obviously, that's me, one, him, two, good. That's not enough for a Kickstarter. He went on the Kickstarter, huge success. And people were like, wow, how did you do that? And I was like, because I know these people. Like, I know these audiences. I know exactly the websites they go to. I talk to them there. I know my niche exactly. And I knew that I'm serving this extreme niche. So when you put just games out there, just remember that there's a lot of games going out there. It's very easy to get lost in that noise. Just make sure to do something smaller and focusing on a niche. That usually allows you to have better loop with the players and iterate and do something really cool. I think we have a tiny bit more time left if someone else has a question. Yes.
Do you have any like tips or like something like that? People who want like work experience in the industry, but like are like still in school.
Right.
Yeah. Like how would you best go around finding like work experience if you can't like move around as much?
Right. So obviously I'm a few years older than you, just a handful. So my perspective is different, obviously. I can tell you from an employee point of view, and this is people don't want to hear it. The reason most companies are reticent doing placements are two reasons. One, legal responsibility. There's a whole set of things that comes in, and you might say you don't care. They might say they don't care, but the HR team will, right? And I can tell you that the first time, because we did placements at my studio, and I remember the HR was like, that's really cool. Here is the documentation that you need to read through. Okay. So that's one part of it. And then the other one is that it's usually more effort, like it costs the studio. Because with respect, it's not about talent, but about applied talent. And the chances of you being able to create enough value to pay for the time that they have to invest is little. So what you need to do is that you just put yourself out there, contact a bunch of studios. The benefit now is that if you can find someone local, that's brilliant, but you don't have to stuck with that. Like there's a bunch of studios. Bossa studios, we're fully remote, for example. So there are studios who are kind of have this kind of intake still. There is the optics is hard at the moment because of all the redundancies and everything. I think most studios struggle to sell it internally. Is that, oh, we're going to bring in students now after we laid off, 1,000 people. So it's a bit tough. So I feel like just put it out there and keep like contacting people. And I know it's not pleasant because it comes with a lot of like refusals and a lot of no answers and whatever. But frankly, I think you have to make your own luck. Like you just have to decide, I am going to spend whatever is that you're doing. I am just going to do that. I'm going to spend this summer on that and just keep doing. I know it's a bit of a non-answer that you make it yourself, but it's kind of true. So those are the two things. One is that you reach out to a lot of people, and then the other one is that you just do your own thing. And yeah. Yes.
I was developing a long time ago, 10 years ago, like a simulator, hybrid learning. Now it's happening, lots of things. I noticed gamification.
Yes.
And so, for example, for me, I thought like the best way to get into the niche is like to solve an issue, a problem. So I noticed in England and in all the world, mental health. So, like for example, happy chemicals like motivation, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. It's possible to create a route, like, so if you create a game which would be related with mental health, I would think it would possibly get more funds than just to create a game to play.
Yes, so I mentioned at the beginning that I'm involved in multiple projects which are games with a purpose, which do more than entertainment. I was involved in a project, and I'm so deep in NDAs that I can't tell you. It's a big company the name of the company is a fruit. And they were doing a bunch of this stuff, and they are continuing doing that. What they found is that it's very hard to sell, to convince audiences that it works. Because a lot of people are a bit skeptical about it, but I think that now the data is coming in that there is a difference now, and there is startup money on that. I can tell you. I worked with 2 companies, both of them were lifestyle. I am actively working right now on a medical, which is helping with rehabilitation using gaming stuff. That there is in medtech, and there is money.
Do you believe it's possible, instead of antidepressants, to create game simulation which would help people to get out of depression, because it would be firstly assessment, profiling, and
Right,
then
right.
according that the game would be a narrative according to.
Look, I'm not a mental health expert, and neither I would want to trivialize.
I think it's one of the easiest way to get like funds and
Right. I think there's a danger of, again, trivializing depression, but fundamentally there are. Yes, so one of the lifestyle app I was involved in that was basically kind of mindfulness, is a version of that. So absolutely there is, and this is again the example of the niche stuff, right? And it can be a niching of a specific gaming stuff, but it can be gaming applied elsewhere. There are absolutely opportunities, and it's just you have to learn a different language because the people you're talking to, and I can tell you that the rehabilitation app, luckily I'm only involved in the creative side, and they're telling me how they're pitching to like hospital administration, how to do that, and I'm like, I don't know, like I wouldn't be able to do that. So, but there are these markets. In fact, I believe that interactivity and that kind of rewarded interactivity like games do are going to be unavoidable, and that's the future. And I think I'm just out of time. So thank you so much for listening. I hope I didn't bore you too much. And if you have any questions, feel free to come and find me here. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you.